Good night, Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome again to the EB Show. As you know, the EB Show is hosted each week, every Thursday between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. right here on i95.5. I am your host, Ramkumar Narinesingh.
And I'm Umar, Abdullah.
And we are here again hosting this media platform, which is here to provide you with information related to matters of your social interests. In tonight's program, we have with us a world-renowned guest. It's Professor Dr. Peter Baofu. You want to say good night, Doctor?
Yeah, good evening.
The Professor Doctor, he's world-renowned. He has a number of accolades to his name. Umar, you want to share with us tonight?
Yes, this guest that we have here tonight, he's a world-renowned American author and visionary. He has written over 160 books. He speaks about 10 languages. He had visited over 110 countries. He has a U.S. Fulbright. He is a U.S. Fulbright scholar in China. He has taught as a professor in a number of universities in Western Europe, the Caucasus, the Middle East, South Asia, North America, and South Asia. So, this is just scratching the surface as regards to the profile of this individual. And we thought it best to bring him in here tonight to discuss some matters that is affecting us here nationally. Professor Peter Baofu. Now, not a lot of people you find you hear with that handle to their name, Doctor, Professor. What part or what role could civil society play in all of this?
Okay, let me just say a bit about the feedback. I think that the conversation so far is a bit too much on the left. Okay. I think that it's not healthy for this country to think like that, because now we tend to blame too much of the problems that people have been laid off on some other groups, like on business or government. The government is not doing much, or the business are bad because they are doing this. I think that is we need to look at the issue also more or less from all sides. We need to listen more to what the businesses have to say about this. We need to listen more to what the government has to say about. Maybe they have their own reasons, or what civil society have to say about this. And I also think that the individual workers, they also have something to take care of themselves instead of being like a baby. And when you have a problem, you just say, "Oh, help me. If you don't, it's very bad. How about you?
Right.
How about you?" And don't just tell me that.
That's a very good point.
If you lose a job, you say you cannot pay for mortgages, you cannot buy food and all that. Why do you blame on other people for your own personal problem? So just by blaming others by itself is not solving the problem. We also have to look into the situation that the people have been preparing to foresee some of this problem happening. There are some individuals that I know, even before they get laid off, they have certain plan. They plan for their own family life and their personal life. If something happens, they know what to do. And over time, those are the people, they are more likely to be resilient and to be able to find another job, go to another training, or able to have something else, some emergency fund or some emergency income to take care of themselves. People who are helpless are often the people who cry like a baby when there's a problem and blame the problem on someone else. So I'm not saying that is not necessarily good or bad. I'm just saying that we need to listen more on the other side of the debate, not just on one side, and we keep punching the other groups in order to defend this group. This is for me, is a one-sided conversation.
All right.
Just want to add a short point over here is that the conversation is set up not about this conversation, but I'm talking about in general, is because that is too politically correct. The same problem exists in my country, America. We have the same problem with trade unionism. We have the same problem with people who are unemployed. But when you put a conversation which is too politically correct, some people, especially those businesses, they don't want to talk about it. This is just like the problem with racism. In America, we have racism, but when there is racism and people talk about it, let's say blacks or Latinos or something like that, they tend to be very emotional, very angry. Why? They don't want to talk about it. They avoid this. Because the way that you portray the conversation, the way that you carry out the conversation, many whites simply don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Because the way that you put it is so politically correct.
Right.
You put the other side, you make them very, very uncomfortable. If they say something back, you call them racist right away.
Right.
Over time, white don't want to argue with a black in public. They disagree with that, but they don't want to talk about it. So when you talk about labor unionism over here, the way that you talk, the way that I heard in this conversation, for me is very offensive.
Right.
It's one-sided. You portray the other side as the enemy. You
Which
are the
side?
good guy, they are the bad guy. So when you engage
Who,
in a
who are we talking about here?
I'm not talking about any side. We versus they can be any group. It can be you, they can be they. I'm not making any specific.
Understood.
Yes, I'm making a general comment. You doesn't mean you. You can be anyone. Can be you talk and you engage in a conversation like this, you destroy the conversation. You
Okay.
make other people less willing to come in and talk to you because you're not listening. You have your own agenda. So I see this problem not just in the U.S., in Trinidad, everywhere that I went, is the same phenomena. So there's a lot of abuses, misuse, corruption among labor unions.
So
Into all sides of the equation and talk about the way that I have heard so far is very one-sided. I understand that the whole thing, there's a corruption in there too. Don't think that the other side is bad. You are the good guy. You are also corrupt too in many ways.
Dr. Professor Baofu, so what I'm getting here is that there isn't enough open door policies.
Yes, exactly. I think that this kind of conversation is quite self-destructive in the end. Again,
You have like about maybe a minute or so closing comments.
well, I just want to repeat what I just said is that I heard the conversation, which is very one-sided. This conversation has the tendency to focus everything on the worker and to blame the problem on other people. I think that the workers have a lot of problems that the worker have to focus on, and many of them is also their own problems, and do not always try to ask other people to solve their own problem. How about you? You again, I know that I'm not talking about you.
No, I know.
You have to look into your personal problems. And many of them are the problems created by the workers themselves too over time. And you have mentioned, and some of the questioners have talked about this too over time. And those are the issues which we have to focus on. And the conversation right now is just too one-sided. And as I always said, you need to look into all sides of the conversation, not just from the standpoint of the workers, but also from the standpoint of the businesses, of the civil society, of the government. And also not just from the standpoint that you have to defend the workers, but you also have to pinpoint other problems which are the problem of the workers created by themselves. They have to be responsible too. And also talk about not just about the right, but also about the obligation, the duties.
Rights and responsibilities.
So no matter which issue, how you look into, I always say look into all sides of the equation, not just one-sided. The conversation so far is very one-sided, driven by that angle of value judgment that I point out at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's time to change, by the way, but you don't need to listen to me.
No, thank
You're
you.
quite
very-
right. You're quite right. It's time to change, and change is ever so constant. What I think we need to do, Mr. Narinesingh, is get some of those guys on this program,
Yeah,
trade
of
union
course.
leaders, the politicians, and let's really have an open door conversation, an open policy conversation on this program, and let's take this idea forward and let's see how best we can effect or influence that change that we want.
All right, listeners, we want to thank you all for tuning in here tonight with us. As you know, this conversation continues next week, Thursday.